my eye. Through the mist, my surprise shone light from distant northern skies. At that point, I realized I don't know where it comes from, but I know it's okay. If this is all an illusion, then I'm willing to play.
Welcome to the Quantum Guide Show, interviews with awakened masters as they share their quantum work with you. The Quantum Guide Show is produced by Karen Holton, creator of the 9 Steps to Quantum Health Transformation, a free 9-step online course to give you the tips and resources you need to thrive. Karen lost and continues to keep off 178 pounds of surplus body weight as she made her dreams come true. Whether you are awakening to the ascension process or simply want a wiser, more efficient lifestyle, this program is for you. No strings attached. The Quantum Guide Show is brought to you in part by Zendome's Orgonite, Karen's unique brand of orgone generators, ethically sourced, handmade, and double charged for maximum effect. Find out how orgone generators work and what they can do for you. Don't be fooled by imitations. Check out Karen's current selection, only available from her website, KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Quantum Health Transformation. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the Quantum Guide Show. Today in episode 43, I'm very pleased to introduce you to one of my favorite returning guests, Preston Dennett. We have an exciting show for you today featuring some firsthand experiences from Preston's latest book called Wondrous. As most of our viewers know, the extraterrestrials have arrived, and Preston's latest book contains 25 all-new original cases of people who have had extensive UFO encounters. Published for the first time, these true firsthand accounts cover the gamut of the UFO phenomenon: sightings, USOs, landings, face-to-face meetings with ETs, onboard UFO encounters, and whistleblower stories revealing shocking secrets that the government doesn't want you to know. Preston Dennett takes you on a fascinating journey deep into the heart of the unknown. These 25 startling and wondrous UFO encounters will change the way you view UFOs and these strange visitors to our planet. But before we continue with this fascinating subject, here's a little bit of background about Preston Dennett. Preston began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when he discovered that his family, his friends, and co-workers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. Preston is a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, also referred to as MUFON. He's a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and the author of 28 books and more than 100 articles on UFOs and the paranormal. Several of his books have been Amazon UFO bestsellers. His articles have appeared in numerous magazines, including Fate, Atlantis Rising, MUFON UFO Journal, Nexus, Paranormal Magazine, UFO Magazine, Phenomena Magazine, Mysteries Magazine, Ufologist, and others. His writing has been translated into several different languages, including German, French, Portuguese, Russian, and Icelandic. He has appeared on numerous radio and television programs, including Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell, Coast to Coast, and also the History Channel's Deep Sea UFOs and UFO Hunters. His research has been presented in the LA Times, the LA Daily News, the Dallas Morning News, and other newspapers. He has taught classes on various paranormal subjects, and he lectures across the United States. Preston currently resides in Southern California. Please do check out his website, www.prestondennett.weebly.com, and all the links will be in the description below this video. So hi, Preston, how are you doing? And what's new and exciting in your neck of the woods?
Hi, Karen. Thanks for having me back on the show. It's always fun to speak with you. I am keeping busy for sure, working on my next book, interviewing new people. I love this subject. I think it's very important. It's going to change the world, and I am honored to be a part of it.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. I was thinking that maybe we could start off. I recently saw you speak on a show called The Biggest UFO Cover-Up in History, and it was produced by Third Phase of Moon. I recommend people go and check that out on YouTube. And I thought that maybe we could start with a little bit about some of the comments you made in that show. So what folks are probably wondering is there an ET threat? And should humans be afraid?
I'm going to say no and underline it and put it in bold. There is a lot of fear surrounding this subject. I think we've got a fear-based media. We're taught to fear. And yeah, I mean, this can be a scary experience for people. But having researched this field for, it's 35 years now. It's a long time I've been in this field. I don't think they're a threat. I don't think there's any compelling evidence to say that they're a threat. I know people do have what they perceive to be negative encounters. And as I said, it can be scary if you suddenly wake up and there are grays in your room and they're saying, come with us. And next thing you know, you find yourself laid out on a table, undressed and being physically examined. I can see how this would be traumatic. And what I will tell you is that is probably where the trauma lies and why some people come away from this experience feeling like this was negative for me. But if you step back, try not to fear, look at this from an objective angle, you will see that this perception, I think, is not accurate, because what actually happens when someone is taken on board, yes, they're physically examined. Often this involves healing. This is the subject of one of my books. I've documented more than 300 cases. These come from all major investigators, whether it's Bud Hopkins, John Mack, David Jacobs, Barbara Lamb, Dolores Cannon, Yvonne Smith, Edith Fiore. I mean, they all have healing cases, and they're not getting a lot of attention. This is when my first clue, like, maybe this is not a negative experience as is being portrayed in the media. And when someone doesn't have a strong fear reaction, they're not rendered unable to move. Their memories are not suppressed. They are given freedom of movement and allowed to tour the craft. This is not unusual. They're taken to the engine room. They're taken to the control room and taught how to fly the craft. They are given warnings of all kinds, like, why are you polluting your planet? Do you realize that you have environmental issues coming up that are going to cause you all kinds of problems? Why are you messing around with nuclear power? There's a very, very prominent spiritual aspect to most UFO encounters. People are being taught all kinds of spiritual wisdom. They come away from their encounters learning how to do healing, hands-on healing, Reiki. They come away from their encounters profoundly psychically awakened. If you look at all of this, you will see that, no, this is not a threat. This is not bad news for us. ETs, I'm going on about this because this is important. ETs have been around for millennia, longer than we have. Do you really think they're here to take over? No, they're not here to eat us for lunch. They are not trying to scare people. I have no accounts of what I would call sadism or torture The first words out of ET's minds is, don't be afraid. Have no fear. We're not here to hurt you. Their agenda is not to hurt us. In my latest book, Wondrous, I have accounts of this where one of my favorite chapters, the last one, the lady asked flat out, she had a long conversation with a gray who introduced himself as Sen. They had a long conversation. And she asked him flat out, are you here to take over our planet? And he said, no, we have no interest in your planet. It's far too crowded. You guys are way too emotional. There's plenty of planets out there for us. So sorry to go on about this, but this is something that just, concerns me. No, ETs are not a threat. They are good news for humanity.
No, I want you to talk about it because it's on my mind. It's on everybody's mind. And I don't want to get too much into current politics, but it seems that we're finding out very quickly a lot of what we're being taught is supposed to be for our own good, and it's not truthful. And so if I take a look at all the other different things that we're being taught by experts as being not good for us or what's supposed to be good for us, I don't know if the governments are claiming there's an ET threat. I don't believe it, but also I don't have the experience that would support them as being a threat. I've had some sort of unusual contact experiences myself. I'm working on my book. It's just taken a long time. But my point is that I would agree with you 100%, Preston. I have seen no evidence of there being a threat. Plus, if they're that technologically advanced and they've been around for thousands of years, maybe longer, they could have taken us out a long time ago, and they haven't. And I think
it would have been easier a long time ago too. Why would they wait until it starts to get difficult? They are a threat to the government power structure.
Yeah, I was going to say they're a threat to the money, because now that they've reverse engineered and found some technologies they're playing around with, like children that don't know what they're doing, and it's all about that. I agree. So I'm really glad that we got to talk about that right off the top, because some of the experiences from your book, people could take them as being a bit scary. Like, for instance, in your book, you talk about an experience from a young couple that were expecting their first child. And then they discovered that extraterrestrials have taken their baby. Can you tell us more about that? And is that something that was a fearful experience?
Yeah, this is a very interesting case, and certainly not unique. There are some unique aspects to this one, which is why I wanted to include it, because this does happen. There is a agenda on the part of the Greys in particular to revitalize their genetics, which have been damaged. They have had a lot of trouble reproducing in the past, and are working with humans, taking genetic material to revitalize their genetics. And often this will involve women who carry a pregnancy to a certain extent, and then they will take the baby. And people who have this experience have agreed to this.
Okay, so it's not a shock that one day they're pregnant and the next day they're not, and they have no idea what happened. They know what's happening.
Well, maybe not consciously, because here's the problem. The humans have a tendency to compartmentalize their consciousness. We are not always aware of everything we're thinking of our subconscious, our superconscious. And when ETs come down, they're communicating with our whole selves. And people have a tendency to suppress a lot of what is happening to them. So often someone will come away from an experience saying, no, I didn't give permission. I did not allow myself, I didn't say you could kidnap me and take me on board and implant me and take my baby, when in fact you did. So this is a problem. And this is something I think the ETs are having a little bit of difficulty understanding, how limited our awareness is of our own selves. Yeah, this case is a good example. It occurred in 2006. This a young Canadian couple had just moved from Europe. Well, the wife had. They were newly married. They moved to a new house. They were starting a new business. They had a lot of stuff going on, and they became pregnant. And they weren't planning this so soon, but it was, of course, good news. And everything was fine. The pregnancy progressed as normal. They went to the doctor. They got a midwife. Tests showed she was pregnant. They sent me the pictures, the medical records, blood tests. I mean, they felt the baby kicking. So this was a full-on pregnancy that carried all the way up to about 7 months.
Oh.
And they had a weird missing time incident on the way to a friend's house. Both of them do have a history of UFO encounters. The husband, had seen UFOs a couple of times, as had his father. She had experienced light beings coming into her bedroom. Her father was also a famous psychical researcher in Europe, so they weren't entirely ignorant of the UFO subject, but it wasn't really a part of their life. It wasn't something they thought about a whole lot. And so when they had missing time, they didn't really know how to categorize it or what to think about it. All they knew is they somehow got confused on the way to the friend's house and arrived there, at the wrong time. And they couldn't quite understand what had happened. And it was a short time later that they were in their home, woke up one evening to a very, very severe electrical storm. And he jumped up to close the window, and he could see lightning flashing through their backyard, horizontal streaks of it. It was not normal. And it was quite intense, and they were pretty alarmed. So he slammed the window closed and jumped back into bed. And that's the last thing they remember, which is odd because they were both pretty much adrenalized, a little fearful because it was quite a storm. Mm-hmm. And they wake up the next morning feeling a bit groggy, almost like coming out of surgery, they said. And she turns to her husband and says, "Honey, I don't feel pregnant." And he's like, "What do you mean? Of course you're pregnant." She says, "Look, is my stomach, not as big?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know." She says, "Honey, I don't feel pregnant." Mm. They thought maybe, the baby had been in a breech position, and she had been doing exercises prescribed by her midwife to sort of encourage the baby to move to the proper position. Mm-hmm. She thought maybe that was it. They had an ultrasound appointment scheduled for I think it was 3 days later, and they moved it up, went to the doctor and got an ultrasound, and the doctor said, "I don't know how to tell you this. You're not pregnant." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "There must have been a mistake, a misdiagnosis. There will probably be disciplinary action taken, but you're not pregnant." And I said, "That's impossible. I felt the baby kicking over and over again. Mm-hmm. We have had the test, the blood test, full on. This could not have been, a so-called hysterical pregnancy. She felt the baby kicking." So this was very concerning. They started crying. The husband was especially upset. But they were sent home. And this is when they started to really research the subject. Mm-hmm. Because they had a sense of what might have happened. And looking into UFOs, they realized, oh my gosh, this is a thing. This does happen to people. And I have to tell you, I ran into cases like this very early on in my research and continue to. This is definitely not unique. Usually this will happen around 3 months of pregnancy. Someone will suddenly have a disappearing pregnancy or a missing twin. Mm-hmm. They'll be carrying twins and one's gone. And this is what happened in their case. And the wife, after she realized this, felt actually okay about it. She was fine. She had a very strong intuitive sense that her baby was alive and fine and with them, the ETs. The husband took a little more time to adjust.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was quite traumatic for them initially because they had told their whole family. They had to tell both their sets of parents, like, we're not pregnant anymore. They had a nursery ready and everything.
Mhm.
So it was, not easy to deal with by any means. But
Mhm.
they did not take it as a negative experience.
Good, because yeah, what can you do? I think there's so much we just don't know that will one day be known. It's funny, they actually have a medical term. I don't remember what it is, but there's a medical term for when you're pregnant and then you're not. And what they claim, I'm talking about what medicine, earth medicine is saying, is that they die and we reabsorb them. But I don't know. I think that's there's lots of things they can't explain with medical science. And so they just sort of make up, well, this happened or that happened. Then you find out years later it wasn't that way at all. So yeah, I've heard quite a few different accounts of people, generally around 3 months gestation is when the babies are taken. And apparently this will be for everybody's benefit down the road. But still, that would be pretty hard to deal with. And I'm really glad that they were able to take the perspective where they could understand that it served a purpose. When tragedy
Yeah.
strikes, if we don't feel like it serves a purpose, it's a lot harder to deal with. Now that leads to another.
Well, can I make one real quick point?
Sure. Oh yeah, of course,
Just as a sort of an end note and a little silver lining to all this is what usually will happen. And I don't know about this case. I recently just got back in touch with him. I was trying to get in touch with him, and he so we're going to speak, and I'll find out. But usually when this happens, people will meet the baby. They will come back
yes.
and they hold the baby. And I'm talking to several people now who are still in touch with their adult children. They name them. They have names for them. They get to meet them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not as often as they would like, but yeah, they are in touch with their adult hybrid children.
Mm-hmm.
One lady met her kid in the kitchen, and he says, "Hi, I just want you to know, don't you recognize me? I'm your son. I'm always watching over you. You will be protected. We love you," and so forth. So
Mm-hmm.
just want to stick that in there.
Well, I'm glad you did, because I have a lot of very kind of cool friends that have different experiences, and I have one friend. She's actually on my show from time to time, and she was for various reasons unable to give birth here on Earth, but she was not used, but somehow she was able to have children that were born and raised on ships that were not here on Earth, and she takes great comfort because she's been able to go and meet them. And exactly like what you said, and it gives her great comfort, and her children are not traumatized, they're not unhappy. It's part of another process, just one that's been very hidden from humankind throughout history. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. In another experience that you share, you talk about a couple that were visited by Greys, and then they found out that they both had a history of encounters reaching all the way back to childhood. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I love this case because it shows some very interesting things that keep happening. I have 4 cases like this in this book alone, in which people become married and then find out they're both experiencers. And often they feel like they've been set up. I don't want to say manipulated because there's bad connotations to that, but like an ET dating service almost. Because in this case, there's a gentleman from Montana who was a very young boy, was out ice skating with his friends, and they all saw a UFO. And he had never heard the term UFO, wasn't sure what he was looking at. Was it a government thing? He wasn't sure. But it was clearly not normal. Everyone stopped ice skating and watched this thing move across the sky, and off it went. And then everyone just kept ice skating like it was all normal. But he was intrigued. And it was following this, he had a bedroom in the basement, that he started being visited in his basement bedroom, his home, by what he described as cat-like humanoids. They reminded him of 3-foot tall, 4-foot tall, hairless cats. And it was quite frightening for him, actually. And this went on through his, young teenage years and stopped. And he always kind of looked at them as some sort of weird waking nightmare or something. And at some point it just stopped and he went on with his life, ended up meeting this woman from Las Vegas and moved to Las Vegas. They became married and enjoyed a very happy life together. And one day they were watching TV. They were, by this point, past middle age. And a UFO show came on, describing people who've been taken on board and so forth. And he turns to his wife and says, honey, that happened to me when I was a little boy. And he started to describe this, cat-like beings and so forth. And her mouth dropped open. She says, honey, that happened to me too. And she described how as a little girl, she had, these beings coming into her room. And she also described them as cat-like. She doesn't have quite the recall he does. She just kind of remembers them coming through the wall, told her parents, as he did. And in both cases, the parents were like, you're having a nightmare, you're dreaming. That's something I think parents should listen to. This is a note to your all parents out there. If your child is telling you that beings are coming through the wall, they might be telling you the truth. Mm-hmm. But at any rate, it was highly coincidental. And both of them wondered about that, like, that's very strange that, we were both experiencers. And was following, this, that they started seeing UFOs again. These were pretty distant, usually glowing objects in the sky. He had a camera, got a camera out and was trying to photograph them. And every time he'd lift the camera, it would zip away. And then suddenly these things came back. They came back to visit him. And he was not happy. And he told them to go away, go away, go away. And it became a battle of wills. And it did stop. And this is another important point. If people do not want contact, if they find it too frightening, you are able to stop contact by just letting the ETs know, no, I do not want to be a part of this. And he successfully did this. He just didn't want to do it. It was too frightening for him. And it ended. And a little quick end note to this case, which is very interesting, is his little brother came to visit. And the guy I interviewed said, oh, little brother, I've got a story. Did you know that, ETs came to me when I was a kid? And his little brother got a little bit quiet and said, oh, really? Oh, my God. Because he had always been jealous of his brother having the basement bedroom to himself. And when the guy moved out, the little brother got the basement bedroom and was down there for 15 minutes, he said, when something very scary happened to him. And the guy interviewed was like, well, what happened? And he says, I don't want to talk about it. It was just very scary. I saw something. And so I'm wondering now if the ETs came and we're looking for the older brother. But it's a very interesting account. And I think this sort of shows how people are brought together. And it shows, how, again, the ET's interest in genetics. And yeah, it's almost like an ET dating service. It's very curious. That turns up in a number of other cases in this book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very, very, very interesting. Sometimes I wonder if society was set up differently where we weren't as quickly frightened by things that were different, because we live on a planet with great diversity. If you look at some of the bugs in the bug world up close, or all kinds of animals, look at everything from a sloth to something else. There's a lot of curious looking beings that live here. And what I find interesting is, of course, a lot of us are sort of a little bit spooked by snakes and spiders and stuff. But the reality of it is there seems to be no support in our society for experiencing diversity, especially diversity amongst species. So even on Earth, there's the different ethnic groups of people. We come in all shapes and sizes and skin tones, but we're all just people. Once we get to know each other, it's like we're just people. It's awesome. And I think the same is true then going to ET, but for some reason, there has always been in the media a message that this is something dangerous, something scary, something to be afraid of. And if we have trouble getting over our minor differences as human beings, how are we ever going to get over some of the differences with extraterrestrial beings? So I'm thinking that one of the things that's adding to the fear component is that we don't have. It isn't just being afraid of what happened, it's how do you tell anybody? It's not accepted in society. We're not given any support. We're given stern warnings that, ET is like the stranger danger thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that has a lot to do with it. So I think it could be a very different, I would say, I would call it a culture, because those of us that are initiated, it's definitely a culture. But
I think we're progressing for sure. We are beginning to really come together as one. We aren't that different from each other. The ETs are not that different from us. They're more alike than different. And I'm so glad you brought up all the different species on our planet, because people would be like, oh, what's it like to meet a different species? I'm like, well, look at your dog. That is a species.
Exactly. And I got to tell you, dogs and cats are way smarter than a lot of humans, including me. So, it's stepping outside of the construct and the mainstream narrative that is as frightening as anything else that we experience. But I didn't want to take this down too far. I always go down my rabbit holes. Would you like to talk a bit about the office worker who had, I understand, a visit from a silver-suited ET? What was that all about? That sounds like a very formal meeting.
Yes, Connie Santos. What a delightful woman. She was so optimistic and joyous and buoyant and just fun to talk to. She was delighted to talk to me. And I was as delighted to talk to her, because, sometimes you have a hard time finding people who won't roll their eyes at you when you say, oh, I've been visited. And so she, really neat lady up in Washington, and wasn't like a very religious person, but started to feel a little bit of unrest in her life and was searching for answers and, about the bigger questions in life. Is there life after death? Is there anyone out there? Who am I? What's my purpose? And this is when she had a very interesting experience. She woke up to see silver-suited short beings in her apartment. How it actually happened was she woke up and there was this huge bright light shining into her room. And her first thought was, there's a helicopter outside. Maybe it's a drug bust or, some police activity. She didn't live in a super great neighborhood. But this was a large apartment building. She thought, well, this has got to be waking everyone up, because she could hear a loud buzzing noise. She's like, well, that doesn't sound like a helicopter, but it was quite, obvious. And she was going to get up and investigate and realized she couldn't move. And that concerned her. Next thing she realizes is there's people in her bedroom, short-suited figures. And she said it looked almost like tinfoil. This was interesting to me, because often people will describe the ETs being wearing jumpsuits, usually tan or perhaps olive green or blue or skin color. Some even perceive them as being not wearing any clothes at all. I think they probably are, but hard to say. And she started to fight against it, and it scared her pretty badly. And she doesn't really remember what happened after that, other than waking up, and it was the next morning, and she was not in the right position in bed. She was like laying over the covers, and the bed looked like it hadn't even been slept in, which was not possible. She jumped up and she felt fluid running down her legs. that concerned her. This was physical evidence, which was not normal. She felt quite a bit out of sorts, a little bit groggy, a little bit flu-ish, and pretty concerned. She tried to write it off as a dream, but it was obvious that it wasn't. No one else in the building heard anything. She made a few discreet inquiries, went to work that day, and realized her mouth was numb, food didn't taste quite right. She had a very upset stomach, and turned on her computer and it blew, boom, went offline. So she called over the IT guy. She says, my computer, can you fix my computer? He's like, okay, get out, let me sit down and I'll fix your computer. And so she goes over to use the copier and blows that out. And had just called the IT guy to fix that. And so while he's busy doing his computer work, she goes over and destroys the fax machine.
Wow.
Every electronic thing she touched went offline. And I was very intrigued to hear this, because this is absolutely a symptom of contactees. And it took me a while to figure out what's going on here, because this is something I've heard many times. People will, radios will fuzz up, streetlights will go out, light bulbs will blow out, TVs will go fuzzy. What happens is the ETs are raising a person's bioelectric field. They are energizing you, pulling you up to a higher vibration. There's different ways you can put this, but it's essentially an upgrade, a health upgrade, is what I've come to, that's my assessment, I should say. And that was absolutely off the charts with her. And this ended up really changing the course of her life. She's thinking, was this demonic? Could I have been visited by a spirit? It started her really searching, and she realized, well, no, this is clearly not demonic. I'm so glad she came to that conclusion, because often, I don't want to say often, but there is certainly a segment of the population who are religious, who feel that this phenomenon is demonic. It's not. I researched this in depth, and I can tell you, no, that interpretation I don't think is valid. But she ended up looking into her past and realized, oh, this explains quite a few things I had overlooked, denied, pushed aside, didn't think about. Because often she would wake up and her head would be at the foot of the bed. And she's like, Mom, why am I waking up with my head where my feet should be? And she's like, well, you just must be a restless sleeper. Like that restless? That doesn't seem possible. So that happened quite a few times. Also, she remembers waking up and hearing low buzzing noises over her home, or when she's visiting a friend's house, and no one else seemed to hear them. Her family used to joke that she was an alien because she's quite short, has a very large forehead. I'm like, oh, well, maybe you're half alien. So that was kind of funny. And she didn't think it was funny at the time. It was kind of, now looking back, she's like, maybe she has some genetic, hybrid type genetic ET heritage, which she brought up. And I found that fascinating, because I can tell you many contactees, particularly the ones who are really facing their experiences and learning and having full unconscious contact, are told this by the ETs. You are one of us. You have ET genetics. You are a hybrid. So I'm thinking a lot of contactees probably have this going on. It's a very interesting case.
Yes, very interesting. Another thing I was thinking of while you were speaking is, people, some people are very afraid of ET and ET agendas and stuff. But if we go down a few rabbit holes on what humanity has done to humanity, not just today, but all through history, I'm more afraid of humans than I am of ET. ET's visits seem to be full of purpose. Like you said, healing, education, warnings, needing perhaps biological components to help them with their gene pool, hybrid babies. But nothing even compares to what humans are doing to humans. And yet I find it very ironic that people tend to be afraid of ET more so, and so trusting of the higher levels of scientific communities and stuff of humanity. I got to tell you something funny too. I was going to a Thanksgiving. We have our Thanksgiving early in Canada, and I went with my son and his partner. We went to a relative of hers, and it's so funny. On the way there, they're giving me a list of all the things I can't talk about. Right? I didn't say anything, but I went, they didn't say I couldn't talk about ET. It was all other things. It's kind of funny. Because they never know what's going to come out of my mouth. And so many people are really enmeshed in the mainstream narrative. They just don't seem to have an imaginary. But anyway, I don't want to take that off topic. Sorry, I do that. I was wondering if you could tell us more about the healing encounters that people have had that are outlined in your book. I know you talked a bit about it, but do you have another experience that you want to share?
Yeah, there's so many, Karen.
Well, take your pick. Take your pick.
Oh my gosh.
I just want people. I want the viewers to hear, some of the positive side to this phenomenon. I think it's really important. It's part of acceptance and coming to a place of not being frightened anymore about it.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought it up, because this is a primary agenda. And I think it happens far more than people realize. I did document some 300 cases stretching back 100 years. And I think that's the tip of the iceberg. Most people who are healed by aliens don't talk about it. It's and this, spontaneous remission and miraculous healings is medically documented over and over again. Some people might categorize it as angelic or something along these lines. There is a case in the book Wondrous. I did include one involving a gentleman by the name of Dudley Delaney. I found his case online, and I begged him, please let me interview you. He says, sure. And he had a very interesting case. He grew up without any real awareness of UFOs other than, listening to it on the radio. He's recently passed away. God bless him. He's quite an elderly man when I interviewed him, and was elderly when he had a healing. I found this fascinating because healings occur to very young children, babies, infants, young kids, adults, and elderly people. It's evenly divided between men and women. It's got nothing to do with race, religion, political affiliation, or anything. Blood type, nope. It happens to all people. What I did find is a lot of doctors, social workers, artists, musicians, teachers, environmentalists, animal rights activists, people who are doing good work for humanity. And that's true with Dudley Delaney. He's a doctor and very into alternative healing. Actually wrote a book about it. And he had a case. What happened to him was he was suffering from prostate problems, causing difficulty in urination and so forth, and had an experience where he woke up and was not in his bedroom. And he was instead lying on a table in a rounded room. And there was a being next to him who he said looked kind of misshapen. Wasn't your typical gray, but was definitely not a human being. And he felt no fear. He intuitively felt like this being was here to help him. He said, "What's your name?" And the being said, "My name is June. You have a cyst. You have a problem, and we are here to heal you." And gave him the stereotypical anal probe. And he felt energy. He says it wasn't unpleasant or painful. It was quite brief. And they said, "We are fixing you." And he woke up, and I'm kind of shortening this, but he woke up and instantly remembered this experience. It was the next morning. He wakes up and felt much better, and his symptoms completely subsided. They had cured him. And I find this case interesting because he was quite elderly. And sometimes I'm like, I wonder about this. It took me a long time to figure out who they're healing and why, because there are cases where they're healing a little girl in a very remote village in Brazil of nearsightedness, and just a kid from Kentucky who has a head cold, struck by a beam of light, healed. I've got like 10, 20 cases of people healed of back pain, chronic back pain. So it's all over the map. They are healing chronic conditions. I've got some 30 cases, people healed of cancer. I love these cases. It shows a real positive side. It's just not getting enough attention. So I'm really glad you brought it up.
Yeah, it's really important. Every time I have you on, the time goes so fast, Preston. I'm wondering if you might like to come back in a few weeks and we could talk about the schoolyard visits, because that's really important too, because children are having exposure to ET and they're not afraid, they're not being hurt. I mean, it's another example of the gentleness and kindness that can happen around extraterrestrial contact. And so I'm wondering if you come back and maybe we could delve more into that, because that's also wonderful examples to help people to feel more comfortable with the whole idea of ET being a real thing and visiting planet Earth.
Yeah, I would love that. Schoolyard UFO encounter. It's the subject of one of my books. I got 100 cases. It's part of the ET agenda to announce their presence, because our own governments have not been truthful, transparent, or forthcoming. So there's a grassroots movement, and the ETs are visiting schools and showing themselves to children. It's delightful, and it's really, really amazing. We all heard about the Rua, Zimbabwe case at Ariel Elementary School. That's an ultimate case. But there's so many. Yeah, I would love to talk about that.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Now, before you go, can you tell people where they can find you? I will have your website on in the description, but I understand now some of your books are out on audio. So people who, for whatever reason, don't have the circumstance, just pick up a book now and then. They want to listen to it maybe while they're doing a mundane task, or they just want to listen to it to relax. How many of your 28 books are now out on audio?
Only 4, but I'm working hard
4.
at it. The newer ones, definitely.
Okay. And are you the reader? Are you the voice behind, or is that done by someone else?
Done by someone else. It's quite technical to learn how to do this, and with formatting and all the files, and have to be a certain way.
I'm sure the reason I ask is because I really enjoy your show where you talk about different cases. For those of you who haven't checked out Preston Dennett shows, they're fantastic. They're full of so much information. And I just find your voice very soothing, so that's why I asked. But it doesn't matter. The fact is the information's there, and it's available to people on audio format now, as well as. And so where would you like to tell people to find you, Preston?
Yeah, well, I do have a website, as you mentioned. Just punch my name in. It should take you there. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. And yeah, I'm on YouTube, putting out my information there. I'm pretty, easily reachable. I do try to respond to people who reach out, whether they have a question or a comment or a story to share. Again, I feel this is a really important subject. I'm so glad to see it being taken more seriously and being discussed in the mainstream media. I don't think people should look to our own governments for truth on this, unfortunately, and I hate to say that. But the truth will come out. Disclosure will happen one way or another, probably through a CE5 group, people calling them down, or one day the ETs will just get sick of it and say, you know what, here we are. But yeah, this is a really good thing that's happening to humanity. They've been around for millennia. They are here to teach us. They look upon us as brothers and sisters, as their children, as equals. So that would be my advice to people. Don't fear them. Meditate, reach out, try to elevate yourself, learn to love your neighbor, walk with love and truth and knowledge, and we will be just fine.
Oh, I agree 100%. Thank you so much, Preston, for being on the Quantum Guide Show. Thank you to all the viewers. Please like and share this video with your family and friends, and please do check out all of Preston's links, which will be in the description below. And so until next week, I'm going to say love you all and bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for the Quantum Guide Show. Become the change you wish to see in the world. Subscribe to Karen's YouTube channel, click the like button, and share this show with your friends. Check out Karen's website at KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com. All the links are available in the description box below. Until the next time, keep up the good work.
Splendor in endlessness puts all my inner strife to rest. For time gives birth to hurriedness. It all makes sense, well, more or less, and the sages put me to their test. With heart and soul I do my best to find the answers to my quest. I wonder and I must confess, I don't know where it comes from, but I know it's okay. If this is all in